Some tales are told, then soon forgotten. But a legend is forever. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Now, from the producers of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the real terror begins. November 3rd.
Woo! Okay, I love that. That is the best trailer ever made in the history of film. Hey, welcome back to another edition of 90s Night. I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and of course, I'm joined by the, I don't know what you are tonight. What are,
I'm the Family Saw.
Family Saw. Kells McNell's, obviously. Thanks for joining me, Kells, as usual. And we're diving into one of the, I don't know. I guess there's a bit of a story here about this that we're going to get into, but we're going to talk about Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, the second sequel to the immortal and infamous and legendary classic film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course. And of course, we're doing this as part of, we're sort of doing a little bit of a cross promotion here. So this is our 90s Night episode from Black Fawn Distro. You can find us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, but we're also doing this as part of Halloween in May, presented by the Casey Ferguson Show. We're really pumped to do this. And he just asked us, he gave us a call and said, hey, listen, can you do something? Can you do a couple movies? We did one for Candyman as well. So if you've checked that one out, or it's coming up soon, I don't know how this is going to get programmed. But we said, hey, listen, we know that one of the sponsors is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. So I was like, why don't we do Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4? So originally we were going to do Next Generation because that was the movie that was made in the 90s. And then Casey messaged me back and he says, brother, listen, you can do Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. It was made in 1990. You're covered. You're cool. You're good to go. And that means that you don't have to sit through the disaster that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, also known as the Next Generation. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that as we go through this review. But Kells, how you doing tonight? Are you? I know this was the first time you've seen that trailer. You wanted to wait until the episode, so you'd never seen it before now.
I had never seen it before. I held out. This is also my first time seeing this movie, period, by the way, for this episode. So I have feelings about it. I'm very excited. But that was the first time I've seen that trailer, and what a trailer. It's short, it's punchy, it's to the point, and it is quite a thing of legend, I shall say.
I love the
Excalibur
the flute at the start. It's like Zamfir at the start. Like it's like, oh, what is this movie? And I don't know. It's like, I know what they were trying to do with this movie, and I think they almost succeeded, and maybe they did. I don't know, but we're gonna get into it for sure in just a second. But before we do, just want to let everyone know, if you are catching this episode on our rerun, we're actually doing this exclusively as part of the Halloween in May with obviously with Casey and the Casey Ferguson Show, but we are going to re-air it on our YouTube channel. So if you are checking it out on YouTube, please give us a subscribe, hit that button, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell us what we missed, tell us what we got wrong, whatever. But in actuality, this is also your spoiler warning. So if you have not seen the film, like Kells had not seen it a few days ago, this is your opt out. You can tap out, you can go away, and you can watch the movie, and there'll be no spoilers. But we're just assuming that you've probably seen this movie since it came out 34 years ago, or you don't care, one or the other, and you just want to hear what we have to say about it. So without further ado, Kells, let's throw it to you. You always do a drink. You always mix up an exclusive limited edition sort of like concoction that you have going on there. What are you drinking tonight?
Tonight, I have crafted a concoction that I'm calling Texas Roadkill. So nice. It has I tried to do layering, but it's been sitting for a minute, so it doesn't have as much fun color. But it is an interesting combination of black vodka, elderflower liqueur, because flower and elder family members, but also a little bit of tonic water and some vegetable juice, so it would have that kind of creepy, bloody color to it. And I hope it tastes okay. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have not tried this one yet. I'm not entirely confident with the vegetable juice, so that's why I threw in the elderflower.
Okay, here we go. This is a taste test. Taste test number 1. Here we go. Texas Roadkill.
It's not terrible. I think I got a lot of ice water at the top of that because it's been sitting for a minute.
Okay, second sip. Here we go. She's
You know what? That's actually better than I thought it would be. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to say the elderflower liqueur is doing some heavy lifting on this one.
Just like this movie. Just like this movie.
So yeah, not a terrible concoction. So far, I've been pretty good with them. I'm not going to lie, but yeah.
Awesome.
You've got, of course, the synopsis, the most official capacity.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our new 90s night beer koozies that you can get. We don't know where you can get them yet. At conventions, wherever you see us. We are actually going to put them up as part of our new online store that's going up soon. So you should be able to get those. But I'm also, I'm drinking a Jack and Coke, which again is a bit of an acquired taste. It's out of a can. Just thought I'd try something new. And of course, yeah, just like this movie franchise, a bit of an acquired taste, a little bit messy, I guess. And, but I still drink it anyway. So, listen, I'm wearing my Billy Bob's Texas hat that I actually bought in Texas. It's the world's biggest bar.
Most authentic Texas hat.
That's right. Authentic Texas hat. And of course, I'm wearing my Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 t-shirt, the Saw's family. And you've got one on too, right?
I've got my Rotten Rags Representing shirt. This is an excellent shirt that I just got at Shock Stock not too long ago, and I'm very fond of it. So kudos to Rotten Rags. We love you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. Look at that. We're all decked out. And like you said, we're talking synopsis. Now, of course, we can get the synopsis from anywhere online. We can get from any number of places, but of course the best synopsises are synopses or synopsis. I don't know. I'm probably saying it wrong. Synopsi, synoptipuses. Is obviously on the back of physical media. That's where you can find the best stuff. It's usually carried over from when it came out originally on home video, which is like on VHS or DVD. And this one is no exception. So here we go. This is Leatherface. I'm reading off the back of my Blu-ray. That is part of the Warner Brothers Archive collection. Of course, we'll put a link on our YouTube channel where you can purchase this copy as well, because this is it's a little tough to find sometimes. But here we go. Here's the synopsis for Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. He puts the teeth in terror. 2 college students driving coast to coast are lured off the main highway and onto a deserted Texas road. Here they are stalked by the menacing Leatherface and his demented family, a bizarre cannibalistic clan with blood on their hands and a feast on their minds. The students' only chance for escape is a survivalist with enough firepower to blast Leatherface and the rest of the grisly predators to hell. A depraved shocker of intense terror from the gruesome beginning to the bloody finish. And that, my friends, is Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. From the back of the physical media, of course, I watched it on Blu-ray, and that's one of my, obviously, that's how I like to consume my media.
You'd be so proud of me. I did too.
I know it. Yeah. Surprise.
Because I could not find it anywhere. So I purchased a copy, and because I absolutely had to watch it. And now I'm very proud to have this as part of my archive collection. So there you go.
Okay. Well, listen, without further ado, let's jump into some release breakdown, some release details. Kells, take it away.
Yes, so this was released by New Line Cinema. It was theatrically released on January 12th, 1990. Now, you may have noticed from that original trailer that we showed at the beginning that the theatrical release was originally slated for November 3rd, 1989. And this trailer was made that was released in the summer of 89, but the release date was soon pushed to the following year, and it was just kind of delayed for a while. So production of the film occurred in Valencia, California, which you may notice is not Texas. It was directed by Jeff Burr. It was written by David J. Schow, based on characters created by Jim Henkel and Toby Hooper, of course. Now, this one stars Kate Hodge, Ken Foree, R.A. Mihailoff, there we go, William Butler, Viggo Mortensen, Tom Everett, and Joe Unger. Excellent cast of characters there, and it did some numbers. Yeah, at the box office. Not great numbers, but it did some numbers.
Did a few numbers. I don't know if it did some numbers, but yeah, of course. Domestic box office was $5.7 million. So it, I believe it debuted at 11th at the box office that weekend when it first came out. So it didn't do well at all. It was for the most part a failure at the box office. No international box office to speak of, so that was your total, 5.7 million. And it was on a budget of 2 million. Of course, so I mean, I guess it still made it back its budget and its marketings, but obviously they wanted to do a lot more than this. Runtime of 1 hour and 25 minutes. That's the uncut edition. So that's the edition that, and the version that we reviewed. Of course, it was cut down by about 4 minutes, or just over 4 minutes. Some of the gore from the film was cut out so it could get receive an R rating and be put into theaters. But it was obviously very controversial because of the series and how violent the first movie and or unsettling the first movie was, and how violent the second movie was. So the critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes is we don't know, because there isn't one, and there's only 15 reviews on the website. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 13%. I'll leave that with everyone to figure out if that's a fair assessment or not, and we'll get into that as we kind of review the film. But it was, yes, both a critical and commercial failure. And according to Wikipedia, it was the poorest performing film in the franchise until 1995, which is when Part 4 came out, The Next Generation. So it was the worst performing film in the franchise until the next one. So I guess it's not the worst. And if you have seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, it is something else for sure. And that's, of course, if you don't know, that's the one that stars Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey. Yes,
Nice.
those Renee Zellweger. That was a Renee Zellweger and that exact Matthew McConaughey. I think both Academy Award winners. Matthew McConaughey's Academy Award winner.
Yep.
Anyway,
I did it.
so no critical consensus, but we did find a quote. Kells, you did find this and drew it to my attention. But Richard Harrington from the Washington Post wrote a pretty funny review where he said, for those who saw, no pun intended, the first two massacres, this will seem pretty much deja vu, which we now is it deja vu as in like scary, or is it deja vu like boo?
You know, he seems like the type that would mean both.
Yeah,
I think he's being clever and cheeky, and I think he means
Washington
both. That's
Post.
sneaky Richard Harrington of the Washington Post. You crazy character.
Now, of course, some pretty amazing marketing for this film, just based on that, obviously, the teaser trailer we just saw. But Kells, you were able to dig up some other stuff too. What do you got?
Yeah, so there's a couple of taglines for this film, some on the poster, some not. In no particular order. Some tales are told, then soon forgotten, but a legend is forever. The most controversial horror film ever is finally here.
More controversial than the first two parts, but yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know by what standard or rating it was the most controversial, but they've claimed it is. And then on the poster, it also mentions the terror begins the second it starts. There's also, of course, there's roadkill all over Texas, hence Texas Roadkill. He puts the teeth in terror, which there's no teeth in the word terror, but that's okay. And of course, the Saw is family. Naturally.
A classic. And
classic.
Maybe the best tagline of the whole series is the Saw is family. I just, yeah, what a great line. Whoever came up with that, not sure who it was, but pretty awesome.
And that's why I'm the family Saw. The Saw that the whole family saws with. I don't know.
The family that saws together, like stays together or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course we just went over the fact that we both watched it on Blu-ray, which is great. There's no 4K release of this film,
surprisingly,
surprisingly, and nor do I ever feel that there will be. I do feel like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd love for it to be in a box set with all of its
that would be lovely.
Random parts, but there's so many conflicts with the rights. I just don't ever think that's going to happen. But never say never. Scream Factory's done some amazing stuff in the past and pulled off some miracles. So we can only hope, I guess, one day that we might see that. But anyway, did you you just watched this movie, so you have no memories of watching this movie, and I can't actually remember when I saw it, but I do remember seeing it, and however, I always remember this trailer. I always remember seeing it and being like, whoa, like that's cool. Like he's got saw lightning, so I don't know, I don't know when I actually saw the film, but I do remember when I watched the film, I was like, I'm kind of disappointed that there's no lightning scene in the
there
film,
should have been lightning. That's true. There is there's also distinctly less, chainsaw dancing in this film too, which I was disappointed by. I'm not
Less
gonna lie.
chainsaw dance?
Less
Oh, because
chainsaw
that's your
dancing.
shirt with the chainsaw dancing on it, right?
And they even do it at the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Stretch
Yes,
has
that's
her own little
true.
dance that she does.
That's true.
So I was expecting, especially with the lightning, I wanted some fire on the dance floor with this chainsaw, but
Well,
I did not
maybe
get
they
that.
just didn't wanna rehash anything.
Maybe they just didn't want to make it too much of a thing that they just like, there's two things we have in Texas Chainsaw Massacre: Leatherface and dancing. And I,
Yeah.
I
They
just wanted
opted
to
for the
step away from that.
Texas and the chainsaws instead, but yeah. And the massacre, I guess, but,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, me too.
okay, so let's talk about the film. Let's get into the characters, let's get into the casting, let's get into what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, et cetera, et cetera. But, this film, obviously came out in 1990, was a sequel to the first two films, sort of a soft reboot. I don't know. I think it's kind of, I mean, you wouldn't call it a reboot-quel nowadays, but
No,
I do feel that this film is kind of, it does have its own audience, for sure. I think it's my favorite sequel, to be honest. Like Texas
I
Chainsaw
might be that
Massacre.
audience.
Yeah, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one is one of my all-time favorite horror films. I think it's just one of the best. It just gives me the same feeling no matter when I watch it in my life. I
Mm,
always have this sense of terror and dread. I think it's an amazingly captured film.
yeah,
And all the stories behind the scenes, and we don't need to get into them, but potentially like how they filmed it and stuff, just real sort of like a renegade type film that was filmed.
yeah.
And it just has that visceral sort of like emotion to it. Tarantino says it's a perfect film, the first one, that you
Mm,
can't change anything in the film. And I would tend to agree with him. Now, second one is a bit, I like the second one a lot, but it is, we got to make sure we don't swear on this, right? So we're
we can't
trying.
swear. We're doing our best.
It's insanely crazy. And then this movie, when they obviously tried to reboot the series, and you can obviously tell that they moved all the focus onto Leatherface himself, especially in part of the marketing, to kind of create another, like, let's say Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, that type of thing going into the 90s. And back in that day, back in those times, like a lot of those series had kind of maybe run their course, or they were trying to kind of get them going in a new decade and carrying them over from the 80s. Of course, Scream hadn't come out yet.
Mhm.
So there was sort of this lull in horror where they were like, who's the next big like boogeyman? Who's the next big slasher killer or whatever? And I guess they tried to make Leatherface that that icon. Of
Making
course,
that
New Line
comeback.
acquiring the rights now housed, New Line was obviously built on the success of Nightmare on Elm Street. So then now they have two amazing um, horror icons under one roof. And so it's interesting that they never really did anything with that, which I think is kind of like a bit of a missed opportunity. But I think this film sort of accomplishes what it set out to do, and I think that they should have just like it's a shame because obviously it didn't do well numbers wise, it didn't do well critically. Although I don't know what this movie would expect to get, but um, I really feel they should have just stuck the course, and I think that they would have maybe created a franchise just by sheer will. But I
Mhm.
think they decided to make an adjustment. They didn't really know where to take it after this, and it feels to me like a movie that was really confident it was going to do what it was going to do, and it didn't do that. But now,
Yeah.
ultimately, I think over time, I think it actually has done that, and I think it has turned Leatherface into like this kind of horror icon, yeah, especially in this movie, right? So,
Yeah, I feel like if the Toby Hooper 1970s original is like punk rock horror, like in terms of like just, the filmmaking and the style of it and just how like visceral it is, it's very punk rock to me. I feel like this movie is like, it's very 90s. It definitely kind of has a like that almost grunge rock, but like pop grunge rock feel to it, where it feels like it's very, I'm not going to say polished, but it definitely feels it's got its own vibe. I'll say it feels very different from the 1970s Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It definitely has its own particular flavor to it. It's not quite as sun scorched. There's a lot of this movie that takes place at the night time, which is a little bit different for it. The cast is definitely actually surprising. Like I really kind of really enjoyed members of the cast in this, which I know we're going to talk about them shortly. Should we want to get into casting now? Let's dive into it.
Yeah, we can jump into the casting because I mean, there's like let's get the big guy out of the way,
Yeah.
and we're gonna throw up some for those of you who are tuning in at home and watching us on YouTube, we're gonna throw up a few stills from the movie so you can check it out what we're talking about. Fortunately, if you're listening to radio, like I said on the Candyman episode, I got a face for radio, right? So like
Use your
use
imagination.
your imagination as to what we're actually explaining. We'll explain it to you just so you can create a picture
We'll
in
paint a
your
picture.
mind. But yeah, sure, let's go. Do you want to lead it off? Let's talk about the casting.
Yeah, so I mean, Ken Foree, I love him so much and everything he pops up and he's always so great. And I love his character in this is like the survivalist type of I do kind of love the introduction where he's gets in this big car wreck with our two kind of leads, I guess, Michelle and I want to say his name is Ryan. Yep, Ryan. Um, and they just kind of get through this big accident. They're telling him like we're running away from this guy. This guy's chasing us. He's got a chainsaw. And he's like, okay, just take these painkillers. You'll be fine. And just basically like knocks them out more or less with painkillers, which as someone who fancies himself like a survivalist and is trying to help, like giving someone who immediately got into a car accident and probably has a concussion, like here's some painkillers to knock you out is a terrible idea. I'm just going to put that out there. However, when he, again, spoilers, and this movie was supposed to, die when he does near the end, test audiences reacted to him so favorably that they brought him back. Though it makes absolutely no sense to bring him back for the last scene, they brought him back because he was so popular. They're like, we can't kill this guy off. We got to make a grand return with just like a cut on his forehead for some reason, even though he's supposedly been demolished by this chainsaw underwater. Makes no sense. I don't care. I'm here for it. Kate Hodge is Michelle.
It's very weird. It's very weird too, because
it's very weird.
You really do get a sense that like he does just kind of spring up at the end.
He literally
also,
springs into the scene. He's like, hey, and just like pops back up there.
I'd be remiss in saying like, and I oh my God, I feel like my dad when I say this stuff, because like when I was a kid, it's like, oh, whatever, dad, who cares? Like, I was like, he's totally dry. Even when I watched him now, he's literally being like, was what, underwater, held underwater by Leatherface at the end in the kind of the big climax of the film. And he kind of, he picks Michelle up here at the end, and she's totally or he's totally dry, like he's just had those clothes, like it's so weird.
Also, like they go from dead of night to midday as well. I'm not gonna not draw attention to that fact either, but
well, she's walking for a bit, right? I
mean, well, then maybe
Texas.
he had time to dry off. It's Texas.
Yeah, the sun just comes up Texan sun. The sun just comes up like that in Texas. That's how it works over there. But you know what? I do really like him as a character too, and I like the idea. Like I really do feel like they were onto something, and I think this is going to be a theme through this sort of deep dive review. Is that I really do feel like they were onto some good stuff in this film.
Yeah.
The idea that he's a survivalist, it's never really spelled out, but it's kind of alluded to that he might be like ex-military, he might be maybe ex-Vietnam, which is clearly like a throwback to the first movie, because obviously the Vietnam War was a sort of an inspiration to Tobe Hooper when he made the first film. But yeah, he does play well. Like I feel like the two characters, like him and obviously Kate Hodge, who plays our heroine, like Michelle, like I do feel like they fit, and they sort of they both have things to do in the film, and they sort of like indirectly work as a team, which again is, like you said, I mean, if it was test audiences and they didn't know what to do with it, then they obviously tack this on, but it still feels like it does still feel earned a bit, right? Which I kind of dig. And it doesn't really take away from her. It doesn't really take away from her arc from being like the final girl either, which I think is kind of cool, right?
Totally. I was going to say, I think it's in terms of final girls, she is a solid final girl on this flick. Like she even just kind of right from the get-go, she's very independent. She's not like she's there with her ex, just driving this car across country to get it to her dad. And she's very much just like, okay, like clearly like I don't need you, basically is what she's saying. And she's not really a wilting flower at any point during this film. She's always kind of taking control and like taking oh my gosh, what is the word? I can't think of it right now. Agency. She has agency, right. And making her own decisions and doing what she wants to do. And, she doesn't make a ton of terrible decisions either. Like there's not really a lot of moments in this film where I was like, what are you doing? Oh my God. Which I feel like you get a lot of that in, traditionally you get a lot of that in slasher movies, but that doesn't come up very much in this movie. And I appreciated that. And yeah, I think as a final girl, especially when she is having that kind of final face off in the swamp with Leatherface, and she's like beating him in the head with that big rock. That's just a great fun, oh my God, I just want this over with moment for her, I think.
Okay, so let's like we're working backwards, but like
We
this is
are.
great because the final scene is super awesome.
Oh
I
my
love
gosh.
it.
Yeah.
There's some very weird editing that happens at the end where she like basically Benny, who's Ken Foree, jumps into the water. He kind of saves her or tackles Leatherface, which to me makes sense because they're both sort of like they're on that sort of same physical level, and that face off is coming for sure.
Oh yeah.
And then she kind of turns around she thinks that like Leatherface kind of it's alluded to that he kills Benny with his chainsaw, and
Like
Benny's in the
through the
water.
back.
Yeah, and then I love that scene when Leatherface turns around and his like the skin mask is all blood. It looks
Mhm.
so awesome. I tried to find a still for it, but I couldn't do that. So this is the closest thing I could find, which is basically when Michelle's tied up in the house, in the kitchen or the dining room area, and Leatherface is sort of just like putting the headphones on her, and he's kind of staring her down. It's but at the end of the film, yeah, like I mean, there's so then she just turns around and then he jumps out of the water he's not in the he's not underneath
Yeah.
the water. And then he jumps out of the water. So it's a very weird editing choice. Like I imagine that there's probably some sort of piece of film that's missing
Yeah.
that they could never find when they restored it or something like that. I don't know, but
It's on the
I would
floor somewhere.
yeah, but I have to say this, and it's a shout out to a buddy of mine that because we used to laugh at this all the time. But the end when she's smashing him in the head with this rock, I had to turn the subtitles on because I couldn't really make out what she says. Like I wasn't quite
Mhm.
sure, and she said, "Sorry, little guy. Sorry, little." She keeps hitting him in the head with this rock, which is obviously a throwback to the start of the film where she has to they're trying to kill the armadillo that they've hit with their car.
Yep.
So it obviously it completes that sort of arc for her, which is great. But on a side note, it does remind me of Star Trek 3, Wrath of Khan. Oh no, Star Trek 3,
Ah.
Search for Spock, sorry, where Christopher Lloyd is like hanging off this ledge and like Captain Kirk keeps kicking him in the head. And he's like, he says, yeah, I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing, but he goes, "I have had enough of you." And on the final one, he kicks him, and Christopher Lloyd, like the Klingon, flies off this like mountain into like a volcano or lava or whatever. Me and my buddy used to watch that, and we used to laugh so hard at that. It was like usually me and my bud and his dad, and we laughed, and we used to say that like when it happened, like we'd all say it together because it was just so ridiculous. But that did remind me of this film at the end when she's just repeatedly bashing him in the head with the rock, which is cool though, because that's what you would have to do to take down this sort of like maniacal, cannibalistic, inbred monster, right? Like,
Yeah.
so anyway, I do love that ending. And listen, like Leatherface in this film is he's different. What are your thoughts on him? Like do you like the portrayal in this film, or do you think it's because obviously they're building it around this guy? Um like what did you think when you watched it for the first time?
Yeah, I think honestly for me, this film, though they're building it as Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, for a film called Leatherface, I feel like he's not as prominent in it as much. Like I feel like it is more about the family as a whole. Like it's about Tex, it's about Alfredo, it's about Joe Inger's character Tinker. It's really about kind of the combination of them together, and even the little girl and Mama. It never really seems like it's just like the Leatherface movie. You know what I mean? Like, which seems like a bit of I don't know if it's a missed mark or a bit of a, we just named this before we had a script made or had a director attached or had any kind of ideas what we were doing with this movie. We just made a trailer and just went with it, which is what happened. But I just felt like it was more about the family of this collection of quirky
Mhm.
folks. Um, And I did actually really enjoy that because I love Viggo Mortensen as Tex. I love Tom Everett as Alfredo, Joe Unger as Tinker. They were all great. And I think that they kind of filled this film out in a way that it would have felt a lot more hollow if they didn't have that whole kind of group of them there together.
So let's talk about Viggo Mortensen,
My
because
king.
he's your king. It
Always
is
my
the
king.
Viggo Mortensen. And what's so funny too is like when I look back on these movies, I'm always surprised by like how short of time goes by from when things were made, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about it, like, because it seems like so bizarre to me, like, um, and time flies faster when you get older. If there's any younger people out there listening, and Casey, if you're listening from the Casey Ferguson show, he can vouch for this too. When you get older, it flies by faster.
Well, they
And
say
so
time flies when you're having fun, Benner.
I guess so. I used to think that was just something people said when they had kids and stuff, but apparently no, it's just when you get old that happens. So, but where I was going with this was that the fact that like Nightmare on Elm Street 1 had come out in 1984 and this movie comes in 1990. So it's only 6 years really between New
Mm.
Line sort of launching and then acquiring the rights for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise and then kind of rebooting or soft rebooting this franchise with this film. It's interesting that 10 years later from this film, which is around 2000, that's kind of basically when Viggo Mortensen comes back and starts working on the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Peter Jackson, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's not a lot of time, and I think like for him as Tex, like I really, especially when I was watching it this time, you can see the acting chops there.
Yeah.
He's very versatile in this role in this film, and obviously no one's gonna like. I'm sure he would never even look back on this movie, include it as part of his acting reel, or saying, I'm sure he's including Green Book and it's like some of the films. But he does, like, I do feel like he has this kind of this charming quality. Like he's a handsome guy, right? He does come across as like a believable cowboy, like at the start of the film when he's meeting Michelle,
Yeah.
obviously outside the gas station here in the still. And then of course, once we find out that he's actually this hillbilly, he does come across as this, like, he's psychotic. He is yeah, I mean, he's and but also as well, like there's definitely certain scenes when he's talking to Tinker, obviously, which is his brother, and Mama, who is in the room. Like he always has this boyish like quality to him,
Yeah.
where he's like he's this grown man physically, but mentally he's like a bit stunted, and he's still like this he's still this small child that has this psychotic cannibal mentality, right? So
Yeah.
I do feel like it's a pretty well-rounded performance as far as what he does. And also I couldn't help notice, I love the scene when he puts on the apron. I think it's like really funny. And I gotta wonder now if that was sort of in Terrifier 2 when Art the Clown has
Ah.
the kind of, it's like the frilly apron. It's like a classic kind of like almost like 1950s, 1960s apron. I wonder if that was like a little shout out to this movie. I have no idea. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but couldn't help but think that. And yeah, I mean, him and Tinker, I think, are like Joe Unger. I think they just play really, really well together. The whole
Yeah.
time I watched Joe Unger, personally, I think he's kind of the MVP of this movie. I think he's the most underrated character, I think. And he never really, I don't think he gets a lot of mentions here and there from this film, but he just comes across as this sort of like crazy, like he's almost like a meld of like Billy Bob Thornton and Johnny Depp. Like, and
Yeah.
I love the camaraderie they have, and I love the the like the terror that they bring to the screen as well. You're never quite sure what they're going to do, and it does in the kitchen sequence in that kind of the second act. It really does feel like they're writing that sort of like that dark humor as well, where it, like, this could become a really dark sadistic comedy at any moment, and they don't quite take it there, and which is I'm okay with, but it does feel like they could jump into that territory at a moment's notice.
Yeah, and I do really like Viggo Mortensen in this role because right from the beginning when he pops up as Tex in that gas station area, like I buy it. I believe him. I was very upset when he was getting shot at, and I was like, "Oh no, go back, go help him." Partially because he's always Aragorn in my heart, and partially because again, I bought it. I bought him being the good guy. So when he comes back later, like there was actually a moment watching it early on when he, they drive away, and I was like, wow, he was in that movie for a short period of time, given his name being in the opening credits. Like, I had that foolish moment of like, they got me, those bastards. But I think that, he does a really good job of playing both sides, of playing that charming, like, oh, don't worry, like, I'll help out and I'll take care of this situation, and you get on out of here, and I'll wrap this up. And then coming back and being completely psychotic. He plays both sides very well. And I personally, my favorite in this film was Tom Everett's Alfredo.
Yeah, you can't stop talking about Alfredo.
I don't know why. There's something about him that, like,
he's a great pasta, right? So
it is a great pasta sauce. But I think there, for some reason, I don't know why, but he like reminded me of Pauly Shore in this role a little bit. Like, there was just something about, but I think he had some really great comedic lines, and he just kind of had that very unnerving quality to him that made me physically uncomfortable, and I'm always drawn to that physical discomfort in a movie.
His introduction is one of the creepiest.
Oh, so unnerving.
I have a weird like obsession with like not a weird obsession, but I really like rundown old gas stations and desert like roads. I don't know.
Wondering where you were going with that, but
yes. Yeah, no, I like hanging out in weird, creepy. No, but I just like them on the film. I always feel like they're like these downtrodden things. I love determining whether or not they were built, or whether they found them, or what kind of set deck went into them, because they always look so grimy and stuff. And this one was no exception. I think his introduction, based with that as a backdrop, I think when he's cutting up like the magazine. It's like a Playboy magazine. He's cutting it up with scissors, and he's just so creepy and weird. And he's like, that he's no good, right? As soon as you meet him. And of course, like, it goes from there, right? So I like that he does pop up throughout the film as well. I think that's an interesting way to sort of keep that character sort of around and have that sort of bizarre, somewhat comedic element kicking around. So
well, it also keeps momentum moving as well, because he's the through line to kind of get you through to the family and to Leatherface as well. And having that kind of connection with, or that interaction with Tex, is what kind of shows the reveal later on, is that, like, oh, he is playing them because he's in with this family, and they've orchestrated this whole thing, him telling them, like, oh, go down this new road. It's on that map right there. You just got to follow that road. But that whole gas station scene also just made me think of, Cabin in the Woods, where they have like the Harbinger. They always talk about how like there's always that creepy gas station, and everyone goes, and they always like, they're creeped out by the guy, but they still go the route and they still continue onward with it. It just made me think of that, which I always kind of get a chuckle out of, that Harbinger character in horror films, especially in slashers.
I love it. That it's like the creepy gas station in like some desert runs off some desert road in a diner.
Yes,
I love both like a diner,
classics.
Neon lights at night, raining. Like, I
looks like it's like made in like an old like an old like Sunstream trailer or whatever it is. Like,
exactly. Yeah. All right, so listen, you just mentioned keeping things moving. Let's do that with this show. Let's jump into some quotes, because this movie, we just, like you said, we just kind of reviewed Candyman, the original from 1992, in tandem with this film, as part of Halloween in May. We should give that Halloween in May a quick shout out too. And again, big thanks for Casey Ferguson for throwing us and including us as part of this awesome weekend of programming. Couldn't be happier to be here. And of course, if you're tuning back in on, if you're catching this on the rerun on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, I apologize. Please feel free to give us a subscribe, like this video, leave a comment for us. It really does help us out and encourages us to do more of these and get involved and look back in time to the 1990s, one of the greatest decades for movies ever.
A simpler time. Time.
All right, so let's go. All right, so quotes. Kells, what were your favorite? You want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So two of my three favorite quotes were Alfredo. So again, throwing it back to my buddy, my favorite pasta sauce. So I like the line, "Is it soup yet?" when he's throwing the body parts into the bog and just letting it kind of percolate in there and trying to get those disposed of. I love his line when he's talking to Benny and he says, "Darling, I only got one thing to say to you. I don't like the tone of your voice." Which I thought was very funny. And then a little interaction between Benny and Tex, or Benny says, "Why won't you leave us alone?" And Tex says, "We're hungry." He says, "You never heard of pizza?" which I thought that was a very
and I
cheeky.
feel like they should have cut it there because then his retort is like, I prefer
A
liver, and
liver
then he's
and
like
onions.
onions, and it's like okay, like I
They
mean,
kept it going a little longer than the punchiness of the dialogue. But I thought that there was some really kind of quirky, cute, cheeky moments of comedy in this, and a
yeah.
lot of alliteration in that sentence. But what were your favorite quotes, Better?
I love it when Michelle first goes into the house and she meets I can't remember her name, but the daughter and the little girl who's in there,
Little girl.
and little girl, and she says the little girl says yakety yak, don't talk back when Tex grabs Michelle. And when they have her boyfriend or her ex, I guess, tied up or strung up in the kitchen, and Tinker looks back and says, well, it looks like she might go all screamy on us. I like that one too. And then they're sort of like they're sort of like undressing the dude that's like well, I can't remember the boyfriend's name, but
Ryan.
Ryan, sorry.
Mhm.
So Ryan, not very memorable. And again, it's kind of like Trevor from
He's the real villain
Candyman. He's like,
here. Yeah.
is he the real? I don't want to say he's the real villain of this movie. I think it's pretty clear, but like he's not. But I
Well,
don't know. He's not a great dude. Like he's kind of like he's so super annoying. Can't really do anything for himself. Like, and he's supposed
yeah.
to be a doctor. So I get fish out of water. But anyway, they start addressing him, and they they look at his boxers, and like and Tinker turns around and he says, hey, look here, mama, colored drawers. And then they both, like him and Tex, who's Viggo Mortensen, both go at the same time, California. And I think that's like a really funny like line because like I guess you can only have, like
You're
flashy
fancy.
boxers in California.
California. Which is funny that this was actually filmed in California. So that's
And
a
I did
little
want to give
tidbit.
a shout out to the last, like the big kind of like one-liner in the film too, because I think it's so awesome that Michelle gets this. But it does include your friend Alfredo, so I'll preface this. I got to
Yes.
leave out the swearing because we're on radio, but like as part of Halloween in May. But Alfredo stands and he says, she's pointing, like Michelle's pointing the gun at him, and he says, "What are the chances of a brainless blank like you knowing how to use that thing, huh?" And then she goes, and I'm going to use the Harvey Keitel from Dusk Till Dawn thing here. Okay. But you'll get it. And she says, "Pretty goddamn good, you backwoods." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then she blows him away, and he does this kind of awesome sort of flip on the back of the pickup.
Mm,
It's a great line, really great one-liner for her.
yeah.
Especially since we would imagine that maybe this scene was maybe added on to include Ken Foree, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was already always there. I don't know. You know who would know this? Like is our good friend and friend of the show, Heather Buckley.
Yes.
Heatherface, that's her
Heather.
nickname. Heatherface. This is her favorite movie. This is her favorite, like one of her favorite movies of all
I
time.
can see
It's
why.
her favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Yeah.
I think it. Don't quote me on it. We have an episode with her, and she goes through like that history of it. And I think it's because it's the first film one of the first films she saw, I think, like in theaters or something like
It's
that.
a
I don't know.
fun one. I really
I'm
liked it.
probably
Yeah.
screwing that up. I'm probably screwing that up. But you know what?
Maybe
Next
not.
time we do one of these things, I'll ring up Heather. We'll get her on the program because she knows absolutely everything about this film and everything about horror in general. So so
Mhm.
shout out to Heather. That's two episodes in a row. We should probably just have her on just to
Just get
be
her
a
on here.
third. You just be the third host, right? What's the big deal? So yeah, I love the quotes in this. So and it rides that line of like, is this crazy? Like, or is it like for me, I would say that like I'm not a big fan of the intro of the film, like
Mm,
before the title card and the
right.
credits, like when he's cutting up the face and he's making this mask, and like I get it, but like I just feel like it's not. I feel like the reveal, like we just did this for Candyman, where we're like, okay, so you got a sense that Candyman's there, but you never really see him till halfway through the film. There's all this lead up, there's all this build up, there's all this like, and I wish they had done that with this. I get it that they were just like, no, we got to show him right away. This is the thing. This is what the movie's built around, but I just feel it's a little bit overkill, and it's not because of the gore or anything. I just feel like I think it would have been a better reveal had he had some sort of, if he showed up sort of halfway through and was this sort
Mm,
of like crazy presence and really,
bursts through the door, chainsaw blaring, and
yeah, there's a
that
weird
kind of
thing where
vibe.
he shuts the door at the end of that opening scene that I'm always like a bit like I always feel it's a bit weird, but anyway, that whatever. I'm just like,
I feel like that's also just they needed a kind of perhaps a shoehorn to explain the character of, is it Sarah, her name?
yeah, the other
Yeah, the
girl.
other girl
So
that's there to
they're
kind of help
sisters. Yeah, yeah.
explain. Is like there for the info dump, essentially, of like, this is what's happening. She's the
And
exposition.
but before we move on, speaking of comedy, my favorite scene in the movie
Mhm.
is when Leatherface is using like the speak and spell type of video game, like where, where it says, "What is this?" and it shows a little picture of a clown, and he goes puts in food, and it's like, eh. And he's just like repeatedly keeps putting in
Food.
FOOD, and it keeps telling him he's wrong. I think it's so like I kind of wish that was the intro to the character because speaking of Ken Foree, like his character is sort of like it's kind of interesting how they do it because he is sort of leading the audience a little bit, right? Like
Mhm.
like he just thinks there's a bunch of crazy people. He doesn't know that they're cannibals. So like he kind of like he sort of figures that out. And I kind of wish that some of it was kept back a little bit so the audience would discover that with him. But
It's a
like,
third movie, though. I mean, if you're
yeah,
going
I
into
know.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 not knowing that they're cannibals, I don't know what to tell you. Just saying.
FOOD. And I also thought of like or not The Shining, the Stand, like the miniseries,
Mm,
with the guy who's just like MOON, that spells moon, and he'd always say it with like about like MOON, that spells hamburger and stuff like
right.
that. And I just felt like I was like FOOD, that spells clown. Just what I thought of it. Anyway, that's how my brain works, guys. I'm sorry. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about some interesting
Mhm.
facts, and we'll wrap things up here. We've done pretty well trying to keep these at an hour
We're doing
because
alright so
we're
far.
trying to block these in for radio, and we've always said we need to get these under an hour, right, or around an hour mark. So here we go. Interesting facts and tie-ins. What you find out, Kels?
Yes, so Carolyn Williams, who was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 as Stretch in 1986,
Mhm.
has a cameo as a news reporter. So apparently, director Jeff Burr said he imagined Stretch becoming a reporter following the trauma that she had experienced following the events in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and imagined that she would kind of make it her career to try and hunt down Leatherface. So he popped her in there as a little cameo, which I think is really lovely. Apparently, the film trailer was done before they even had a director and before the production was started, which isn't actually entirely surprising having seen the trailer now. That makes perfect
Friggin'
sense to me.
awesome.
They
New
needed
Line.
more, yeah.
Could New Line do any wrong? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like that
Uh,
trailer is like
it's
banging.
it's epic. Yeah, it's fantastically epic. It's legendarily epic. Kane Hodder, of course, best known as Jason Voorhees, was the stunt coordinator for this movie, and he was also Leatherface's stunt double, or R.A. Mihail. I always double in this last name, Mihailoff's stunt double, and he also was Leatherface in the trailer of this movie.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, I did not
yeah.
know that.
And then, of course, director Jeff Burr wanted to shoot the film in Texas using 60 millimeter film, just like the original. But apparently,
Oh,
New
so
Line was like,
cool. That's a good
"No thanks,"
idea.
because they'd already built the house in California. So they're like, "We got to film it in California." Sorry, dude. Don't know why they didn't allow him to do 60 millimeter film, but probably because it was the 90s and they thought everything would look better not like that. And it
Because they
was the
wanted to
90s.
put
They
out
didn't know any better.
this Blu-ray
That's
in
true.
whenever the end of
They saw into the future and said, "We're going to create Blu-ray players. We need something that's going to work on it." And
That's a
then the
great
last
idea. That's a really great idea. And that shows
Thanks.
some some huge respect
Yeah,
to the original in trying to recreate stuff. I wish they would do that today too with things where they're like, stop using CGI, just use the original
practical.
practical effects. Just like I just don't understand why they just like you want to make a movie like, let's say, like The Thing, go back and find out exactly what John Carpenter had to use and
Yeah,
only use those things that he had at his disposal when he made that
absolutely.
film, and maybe, just maybe, you'll make something that's fairly, iconic, right? I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, if
um
he could do the practical effects on that movie when he was, like, 21 years old, then that's all I'm saying.
right, yeah. And
Yeah.
and it's did you mention the Peter Jackson thing?
No, I did not. So Peter Jackson and, also, Tom Savini were originally kind of, ideally going to be directing this film, but then they did not, and Jeff Burr did, and that's what happened to that. So
you gotta wonder too, like how far he was down the road with that. Like obviously Peter Jackson had made like, you know, when did he make Dead Alive? I wonder if that was that before or after this? If it's the 90s, we should totally
1992.
Okay, you know what?
So there you
We
go.
should totally review Dead Alive.
Oh my God, could we please?
That movie,
I would love nothing more.
is so awesome. I always watch that movie. I always watch that movie, and I was like, "This is the guy that did Lord of the Rings." Like it's like how would anybody put that together, right? Like I always think of anyway. It's a story for another time, but I always wonder. So Peter Jackson goes in with his like Fran, his wife, right?
Yeah.
And he says, "Listen, we're huge fans of the Lord of the Rings." They sit down with his estate, like Tolkien's estate. And they say, "We really want to do this movie. We've got a new line attached to it. We're going to do 3 parts. We got some casting in mind." And they're like, "So what do you have? Like what have you done?" They're like, "Okay, well, I made this movie called Dead Alive. You may have seen it." Okay. So who are you thinking for casting? Well, Viggo Mortensen. You might have remembered him from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Like, I don't know how they pitched that. Like
Elijah Wood from The Good Son. Anyone?
Yeah, maybe they just didn't say any of that stuff, right? They said, "Oh yeah, like." Anyway,
Yeah.
We should do Dead Alive.
I would love to do Dead Alive. That movie is amazing.
All right.
Let's please on the list.
You know what? Let's add it to the list. Let's try. Maybe we'll try and get a guest for that show, because that'd be pretty funny if we
can. We get Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson. Viggo Mortensen. Dex
My
in the
king.
house. All right. So okay. I like before we get too carried away, we're gonna wrap things up. Let's talk about your final thoughts, Kells. Like, you just watched this flick. You've obviously seen the first one, the original, a few times, but like, where does this, like, what are your thoughts, lasting legacy, whatever for Leatherface?
I mean, my first thought was like, is there a legacy with this film? Because if there is, I did not know about it.
Part of the archives collection, okay, from Warner Brothers.
That's true. That's very true. The Saw is family. So I, honestly, again, I knew that there must have been a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, but I knew nothing about it. Did not know that it existed. I had actually seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 a couple years ago because I wrote about it for a list for iHorror, and had not seen this one. I like this one a lot more. This movie is super fun. It's really enjoyable. It's really like, again, it's just kind of it has that very like 90s kind of grungy rock flair to it, but it also just has some great moments of comedy to it. It has really stellar final girl, has a really beautiful chainsaw, has some good practical effects in there too, which
you didn't
again,
really mention the chainsaw, like the big giant gold chainsaw is awesome.
It's like legend mode. Yeah. It's epic. So I greatly appreciated that. And like, again, we were talking about like Robotine practical effects with the thing. I always appreciate when they do practical, and I always appreciate when they go back and make it happen with their hands, which there's no CGI in this movie that I noticed. So kudos to that.
Yeah. I mean, I must say too, like, we couldn't get confirmation of this in time for the episode, but I would hazard a guess and say that Kane Hodder probably did the fire stunt coordination too when goes up. Like I'm pretty sure that was,
I would imagine
him.
So.
Like, it might have even been him in that scene, but we don't know that for sure. That's just a guess.
He's a little bigger than Viggo Mortensen, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially when he's on fire. Right? Like, So
you got to bulk up for that.
Couple explosions. My thoughts on this film is I think that this was sort of like one of the pivotal points in the franchise, a very, very messy franchise. All my favorite horror franchises are completely, I don't know, they're off the rails. The other one is Hellraiser, which I think has like 3 really great entries, and then the rest of them are just absolute, like, just nightmare, like not nightmare fuel. They're anyway, disappointment fuel. And I kind of feel like
they went to
series
space
is the same way. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing too. Like Leatherface, never in space.
Never in space.
Leather space.
Make it happen.
Make it happen, Hollywood. You know what we want. You know the people will eat it up.
The people demand leather space.
Yeah. So, but I think like my thing with this film is that, I think I haven't watched it in a really long time, but the remake, I think deserves a second look, and I'm going to give it one because I kind of feel like this film, Leatherface, like Texas Chainsaw 3, I think is like where before everything went off the rails. And then they didn't really get it back on until they made the remake. And then everything went off the rails again. Like, I don't think any of the movies after the remake are any good. I've never seen the other Leatherface, but we do a breakdown of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the most recent one, which was on Netflix, on our Hot Stove from Hell panel. You can find that out on our on the Black Fawn Distro YouTube page. So give that a shot if you're looking for some more in-depth coverage on those two films. The rest of the franchise, though, is like, it is messy, and I just don't know how they're going to resurrect it. But I really wish that they would just put some real heart and thought into it. Hey, and maybe shoot it on 16 millimeter and see what that does for you. In Texas,
yeah. I don't know where Marcus Nispel filmed 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I hope it was Texas. But yeah, that's like actually a legitimately, surprisingly good remake from the 2000s, because there's a lot of messy ones there.
Yeah, I think
he did a good one. He also did the Friday the 13th sequel in like 2007 or whatever that was too. Marcus Nispel. Right. So.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hats off to that guy.
Yeah, I think I also have to give like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake a watch too.
No,
like, I don't. Okay, well, I like Jackie Earl Haley in that film, right? Like, I thought like he was pretty decent, and he's no original Freddy, but like whatever. But
I have thoughts on that film that we'll not discuss now because we're talking about.
Okay, all right. You're right. Back on track.
Bringing it back.
That's why we keep you around, man. So
just to wrangle, just lasso and bring it back to the point.
I didn't mention. So that's my name tonight, which I thought was particularly clever.
That is right.
Which was Tinker Tailor Soldier Die. So Tinker as Tinker from Tailor. Leatherface putting the mask together. Soldier, because Ken Foree is alluded to be maybe a Vietnam vet, and then die because everyone dies pretty much at the end.
And also Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's very clever on multiple levels.
I feel like you should have leaned into the Alfredo thing.
That's really good. You know what? You're right.
We knew it was you, Alfredo. Alfredo.
Alfredo.
All right. Anyway, listen, we're going to wrap up right now. I just wanted to let one thing. I wasn't sure where to put this in the quotes or my favorite thing, but the movie does end with this killer thrash, like kind of doom, and then thrash track from a band called we think it's called Las Rocket, but we don't know that for sure because they're from California. So maybe it just was like Las Rocket or Laser Rocket or
Lazy Rocket,
Lazy Rocket or Lazy Rocking Chair. I don't know. We don't know what it is, but I will say they made a song for the film, and I just had to read some of the lyrics because I can't get enough of this stuff. I have to go and find this track and add it.
Should have played it during
I know I had to add it to my iTunes collection immediately. I have a track list of all the cool like end like credit songs that are played over the credits from horror movies. It's just a thing.
It's a good playlist.
I like music and I collect it and whatever. But anyway, the song itself is called Leatherface, and here's some lyrics. Ready? Okay, here we go. Heading for the Southland down Texas way, ready for the lightning with a chainsaw blade. Here's your invitation to come join Leatherface. It's his addiction to keep you face to face. That's amazing. Awesome. Look, yes, amazing.
There we go.
Awesome. Devil lasers. Horns up. There you go, guys. And that's
the lasers.
I felt like if we're doing Halloween in May and it's presented by the Casey Ferguson Show, and Casey's a huge metalhead and loves hard rock and loves all that stuff, I couldn't leave that out. So there you go. Good. So anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. That's another edition of 90s Night. I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro. Find us online at Black Fawn Distro and all our social handles and stuff. And also big thanks going out to Kells. Obviously, thank you to you for joining me yet again. And also big thanks to Casey Ferguson and the Casey Ferguson Show for having us as part of Halloween in May. Let's take another look at the trailer for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, also at Leatherface, the greatest trailer ever made. Hey, and we'll see you next time. That's it for us. Take care. Bye.
Some tales are told, then becomes soon forgotten. But a legend is forever. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Now, from the producers of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the real terror begins. November 3rd.